Every compliment you receive is a gilded chain. Every criticism, a stone added to the wall of your own prison. You believe you are being decorated, when in fact you are being buried alive. Why do you welcome your own entombment? Observe the common man. See how he moves through the world, not as a master of his own destiny, but as an architect of his own ruin. He spends his life engaged in a singular, desperate project, the construction of his identity. He believes he is building a grand palace, a monument to his worth, his intelligence, his virtue. But he makes a fatal error in the first, most crucial step. He lays his foundation not upon the bedrock of his own judgment, but upon the treacherous, shifting sands of foreign soil, the opinions of others. His every action is a plea for materials from abroad. A successful project at work is not a victory until it is validated by the praise of a superior. A personal conviction is not a truth until it is echoed by his peers. A moment of joy is not real until it is witnessed and approved of on a public stage. His self-worth is a currency minted in a foreign land, its value dictated by the whims of a market he cannot control. He is not a sovereign but a vassal, paying tribute to 1,000 petty lords, his family, his friends, his colleagues, the faceless spectre of society. He is a tenant in his own soul, living in perpetual fear that the rent of approval will be raised, or worse, that his lease will be terminated without warning. This construction is not a fortress, it is a fragile stage set. It may look magnificent under the warm lights of acclamation, but it is utterly defenseless against the inevitable storms of human nature. The tremors of critique, the winds of envy, the floods of indifference, all threaten to bring the entire edifice crashing down. And when it falls, the man is left buried in the rubble of an identity that was never truly his. He is paralyzed, for how can a man who has only ever built with borrowed tools and foreign blueprints possibly rebuild on his own? He has outsourced the very essence of his being, and in doing so has become predictable, weak, and ultimately contemptible. He is a perfectly functioning instrument, waiting to be played by any hand that understands his desperate need for a pleasing melody. This is the idealist's path, a road paved with the good intentions of others, leading directly to a hell of powerlessness. But there is another way, a path forged not in the pleasing light of acceptance, but in the cold, clear-eyed realism of power. This is the path of the prince, the path prescribed by the great Florentine counselor, Machiavelli. To understand his wisdom, you must first accept his diagnosis of the human condition. Men, as he wrote, are ungrateful, fickle, pretenders and dissemblers, evaders of danger, eager for gain. To build your sense of self upon the judgment of such creatures is not merely foolish, it is strategic suicide. It is to hand the keys of your citadel to an invading army and hope for their mercy. Machiavelli teaches a prince that the security of his state can never depend on auxiliary forces or mercenaries. Mercenaries are disunited, ambitious, without discipline, unfaithful, brave among friends, cowardly among enemies. They have no other love nor other reason to keep them in the field than a meager wage, which is not enough to make them willing to die for you. This is the most important metaphor you will ever learn. The opinions, the validation, the praise, and the criticism of others, these are the mercenary armies of your psyche. They will fight for you when it is easy, when your cause aligns with their own self-interest. They will cheer your victories when it makes them look good to be associated with you. But in the moment of true crisis, when you must make a hard choice, when you face genuine opposition, when the path forward is uncertain and fraught with peril, they will desert you. Their loyalty is to themselves, not to your state. Their advice is tainted by their own fears, their own ambitions, their own vanities. To rely on them is to guarantee your own downfall. The first, most ruthless mandate of a true sovereign is to dismiss these foreign armies. You must declare your mind an independent state, and you must defend its borders with a force loyal only to you. And what are these forces? What are a prince's own arms? They are your own judgment, forged in the fire of objective observation. They are your own reason, sharpened by the study of cause and effect. They are your own will, hardened by the acceptance that you and you alone are responsible for the preservation of your own power and the achievement of your own ends. This is not a call to arrogance or to deaf isolation. A wise prince listens to everything, But he obeys only himself. He gathers intelligence from all corners, but the final decree comes from a council of one. He understands that the only person whose opinion truly matters is his own, for it is the only opinion whose loyalty is absolute. For a fortress built on the approval of others is not a fortress at all, but a stage for your own execution. The first act of a true sovereign is to dismiss these foreign armies. Comment, "My mind is my state," to declare your sovereignty, and subscribe to learn how to forge the weapons that will defend it. To declare your mind an independent state is the first act of revolution. But a declaration is merely a whisper on the wind if it is not backed by the cold, hard steel of an arsenal. Before you can forge these weapons, you must conduct a thorough and unflinching autopsy of your adversary. And your primary adversary is not the critic, the rival, or the dissenter. It is your own idealized, fatally flawed perception of human nature itself. You believe that the judgments of others hold some intrinsic truth, that they are a mirror in which you can see your own reflection. Machiavelli teaches us to shatter this mirror and study the fragments. What you will find is not a reflection of yourself, but a portrait of the person casting the judgment. This is the first weapon in your arsenal, a clinical understanding of the raw material of mankind. The Florentine was not a pessimist, he was a realist. He held up a lens, not a magnifying glass, to the human soul. And his diagnosis is the bedrock of our strategy. He observed that men are fundamentally ungrateful. The praise they offer you is not a gift, it is a transaction. It is payment for a service you have rendered, a benefit you have provided. The moment that benefit ceases, so does the flow of gratitude. To build your identity on the foundation of their praise is to sentence yourself to a life of servitude, constantly laboring to satisfy their ever-changing needs, forever chasing a payment that is always in arrears. Their applause is the sound of their own interests being served. It has nothing to do with your inherent worth. Furthermore, they are fickle or volatile. The same crowd that lays palms at your feet on one day will be screaming for your crucifixion on the next. Public opinion is not a steady current upon which you can sail. It is a chaotic, unpredictable storm. It is swayed by rumor, by emotion, by the latest spectacle. To adjust your course based on its momentary direction is to be a ship without a rudder, destined to be dashed against the rocks. The man who trims his sails to catch the wind of popular opinion will soon find himself becalmed in the doldrums of irrelevance or capsized by a squall he did not see coming. Their judgment is not a compass, it is a weather vane spinning uselessly in a hurricane. They are also masters of pretense and deception. The world is a grand masquerade, and very few people show their true face. The opinion offered to you is almost never the unvarnished thought. It is a carefully crafted statement, filtered through the complex machinery of social necessity, personal ambition, and fear of consequence. The subordinate's compliment may be a bid for favor. The rival's concern may be a veiled attempt to sow doubt. The friend's advice may be a reflection of their own insecurities. To take these pronouncements at face value is the mark of a novice. The master strategist learns to listen not to what is said, but to what is left unsaid. He studies the motivation behind the words, the agenda hidden within the sentiment. He treats every opinion not as a piece of truth, but as a piece of intelligence to be analyzed, cross-referenced, and more often than not, discarded as disinformation. And at the root of it all, they are driven by an insatiable hunger for gain. Self-interest is the engine of the world. Therefore, every judgment passed upon you is, in some way, an act of self-preservation or self-advancement on their part. The criticism you receive is often not about your failure, but about their envy of your success. The doubt they cast upon your ambitions is not about their concern for your well-being, but about their fear of being left behind. They judge your life through the distorted lens of their own. Understanding this does not lead to misanthropy, it leads to clarity. It frees you. When you realize that the opinions of others are merely autobiographical statements about their own hopes, fears, and limitations, they lose their power to define you. They cease to be verdicts and become mere data points in your assessment of the strategic landscape. This brings us to the second weapon in your arsenal, the meticulous management of your own internal treasury. Think of your self-esteem, your focus, and your emotional energy as the gold in your state's coffers. It is a finite and precious resource. The common man is a profligate ruler, a spendthrift who is generous to a fault with his inner wealth. He hands out his gold to any beggar who offers an opinion. He spends fortunes reacting to every criticism, funding expensive campaigns to win the approval of those who have invested nothing in his kingdom. He squanders his resources on the validation of others until he is left emotionally and psychologically bankrupt, with no capital left to fund his own great works. His state falls into ruin not from external attack, but from fiscal mismanagement. The Machiavellian path is one of radical parsimony. The wise prince is a miser with his own validation. He guards his internal treasury with a ferocity that others mistake for arrogance or coldness. He understands that a reputation for being stingy with his need for approval is infinitely more valuable than a reputation for being generous and easily swayed. He treats his attention as his most valuable currency. When an opinion is presented to him, he does not ask, "Is this true?" He asks, "Is it profitable to consider this? Does spending my attention on this opinion advance my objectives?" Most of the time, the answer is no. He lets the insults, the minor criticisms, and the effusive but empty praise pass by like so much counterfeit coin. He refuses to transact with it. This is the economy of inner authority. You must conduct an audit of your own mind. Where are you spending your most precious resources? Are you investing them in your own plans, your own skills, your own vision? Or are you squandering them in the foreign markets of social media, in the futile debates with faceless critics, in the desperate pursuit of approval from people whose loyalty is, by their very nature, non-existent? The truly sovereign mind brings all of its currency home. It ceases to trade on foreign exchanges. It backs its own currency with the gold standard of its own judgment. This internal wealth, this hoarded treasure of self-reliance, is what will fund your campaigns, build your monuments, and secure your legacy long after the mercenary armies of opinion have deserted the field and vanished into dust. Having stockpiled your arsenal and secured your internal treasury, you have achieved a defensive victory. You have built the walls of your mental fortress. But a prince who only defends is a prince who will eventually be besieged and starved into submission. True sovereignty is not merely the ability to repel invaders. It is the power to project authority beyond your own borders, to shape the landscape in which you operate. This requires moving from the role of a treasurer to that of a statesman. The first task of this statesman is to establish the unwavering protocol of his own private council, the throne room of the mind. Imagine this chamber. It is silent, austere, and lit by a single cold light of reason. You, the sovereign, sit alone. The opinions of the world are not permitted to enter as shouting petitioners or demanding advisors. They arrive as written dispatches, delivered silently to your desk. Each one is a piece of intelligence, no more, no less. The praise from a colleague is a dispatch reporting on their current satisfaction, perhaps indicating a future alliance is possible. The criticism from a rival is a dispatch revealing their position and their perceived weaknesses in your own. The anxious advice from a loved one is a dispatch detailing their fears, which may or may not align with the reality of the terrain. You read them all with the same dispassionate eye of a spymaster. You are not searching for a verdict on your character, you are searching for tactical advantages. The weak ruler holds an open court. His throne room is a chaotic bazaar of noise, where every voice, no matter how ignorant or self-serving, is given equal weight. He mistakes the volume of an opinion for the validity of its content. He is swayed by the last person he spoke to, his policies shifting like desert sands. His mind is not a state. It is an ungoverned territory, ripe for colonization by the strongest outside will. The wise prince, however, understands the profound power of solitude. He takes counsel with many, but he deliberates with one himself. After reviewing all the dispatches, he clears the chamber. It is in the profound and utter silence, free from the contamination of external emotion and agenda, that the final, unassailable decree is forged. This is the isolation of command. It is not loneliness, it is the ultimate expression of authority. It is the understanding that the responsibility for the state is yours alone, and therefore the final judgment must also be yours alone. You must learn to cherish this silence, for it is the space where true power is born. Once this internal governance is absolute, you can turn your attention to the world outside. And here we encounter the great paradox of Machiavellian strategy. The man who is utterly indifferent to the opinions of others internally becomes the most adept at managing them externally. He does this not because he craves their approval, but because he understands that public perception is a form of power. A reputation, properly cultivated, is a suit of impenetrable armor and a weapon that can win battles before they are even fought. The goal, Machiavelli insists, is not to be loved. Love is a bond of obligation, which because men are wicked is broken at every opportunity for their advantage. To seek love is to seek to be chained by the fickle affections of the mob. No, the objective is far more strategic. A prince must, above all else, avoid being hated and despised. These are two very different political diseases. Hatred is an active and visceral poison, born of injury. A prince becomes hated when he is seen as rapacious and a usurper of the property and honor of his subjects. In the theater of your own life, this means you must avoid being seen as wantonly cruel, vindictive, or predatory. Any hard action you take must be justified by necessity, executed swiftly and then concluded. Lingering cruelty, pointless humiliations and betrayals that serve no greater purpose than to satisfy a personal grudge will breed a deep and lasting hatred that inspires conspiracies against you. They will not attack you because they disagree with you. They will attack you because they believe you to be a direct and malevolent threat to their own existence. Contempt, however, is perhaps an even more dangerous affliction. It is a passive and corrosive acid, born not of injury but of perceived weakness. A prince becomes despised when he is seen as variable, frivolous, effeminate, pusillanimous, and irresolute. This is the fate of the people-pleaser, the man from our first lesson. He is held in contempt because his actions betray a lack of a central guiding will. He changes his position based on criticism. He makes bold proclamations and then retreats at the first sign of opposition. He is seen as unserious, a ship without a captain. And why is this so dangerous? Because men will hesitate to conspire against a ruler they fear, but they will rush to overthrow a ruler they despise. A despised leader is seen as a low-risk, high-reward target. His authority is a sham, and his position is ripe for the taking. Therefore, your entire public life must become a calculated performance designed to build a reputation for the opposite qualities, for gravitas, for courage, for strength of mind, and for unshakable resolve. Every decision once made in the solitude of your council must be executed with an aura of absolute certainty. Every public statement must be consistent with the image of power you wish to project. You do not do this because you need them to like you. You do this so they will respect you, which is far more stable. You are the director of the play of your own reputation. You carefully select the costumes, write the dialogue, and stage the scenes. But you must never forget that you are the director, not an actor lost in the role. You are not seeking applause. You are seeking to instill in the audience of the world an unshakable belief in your strength. This belief becomes your shield, deflecting attacks and ensuring that potential rivals think twice before challenging a state so well governed. You have learned to divorce your inner reality from external perception. You have learned to govern your mind as a sovereign territory. Now, before we reveal how to cement this new order into an unbreakable legacy, ensure you are subscribed. The final wisdom is reserved for those who have committed to the path, for the last act is always the most decisive. A state that exists only in theory is a phantom. It is through action, and action alone, that a prince brings his kingdom into being. This is the moment where virtù, your strategic prowess, seizes the opportunity presented by fortuna, the tide of circumstance. This is the act of foundation. It is a singular, decisive maneuver, executed not as a reaction to external pressure, but as a pure expression of your own internally forged will. Think of it as the moment a founder of a new state promulgates its constitution. It is a law written by a single hand, often in defiance of old traditions and the protests of the established powers. In your own life, this foundational act will be a choice of profound significance, one that irrevocably alters the trajectory of your existence. It could be the launching of a business venture that everyone around you calls a fantasy. It could be the severing of a fundamental relationship that society deems sacred, but which your own judgment has identified as a strategic liability. It could be the pursuit of a vocation or a body of knowledge that others find obscure or worthless, but which your inner council has decreed is the key to your empire. The defining characteristic of this act is that its justification is entirely internal. When questioned, you will not appeal to the approval of others. You will not say, "I am doing this because so-and-so thought it was a good idea." You will not seek consensus. The sheer audacity of the move will silence most critics, and its clarity of purpose will confuse the rest. This is not a rebellion against others. It is an act of ultimate loyalty to yourself. It is the public and unmistakable demonstration that your state has its own laws, its own treasury, and its own army, and that it is fully prepared to use them. It is the moment you cease to be a provisional government and become an established power. Machiavelli notes that all armed prophets have conquered, and the unarmed ones have been destroyed. This foundational act is you, arming your prophecy about yourself. Crucially, the success of this act is not measured by immediate acclaim. In fact, it will likely be met with confusion, resistance, and even condemnation. This is the final test. The mercenary armies of opinion will have long since deserted you. You will be standing alone on the battlefield of your own making. It is here that the strength of your internal governance, the wealth of your hoarded treasury of self-reliance, will be all that sustains you. You will endure the initial storm not by fighting back against every gust of wind, but by anchoring yourself to the bedrock of your own conviction. The aim is not to win the argument in the moment, but to render the argument irrelevant through the eventual success of your new order. This leads to the final stage, the consolidation of power. The foundational act is a singular event, but the new order is a permanent condition. A true prince does not execute a brilliant maneuver and then rest upon his laurels, hoping the world will now bend to his will. He immediately begins the work of building the institutions that will make his power self-perpetuating. Once you have made your decisive move, you must systematically restructure your life around it. You establish new routines, new alliances, new standards of conduct, the laws and customs of your new state. You create systems that reinforce your autonomy and filter out the noise of external judgment. This is the establishment of your new constitution. The principle that your judgment is the ultimate authority is no longer a revolutionary idea. It becomes the mundane, unquestioned law of the land. Your mind is no longer a fortress under occasional siege. It is a thriving capital city where the business of your life is conducted according to your own statutes. The opinions of others may arrive at the border, but they are now subject to strict customs and immigration laws. They are inspected, taxed, and only allowed entry if they serve the interests of your state. Most are turned away. This is not a process of active struggle anymore. It is the effortless functioning of a well-designed government. You have transformed yourself from a revolutionary fighting for independence into a sovereign governing a stable and prosperous nation. The ultimate philosophical conclusion is this: the greatest freedom and the most potent form of power do not come from controlling the opinions of others. That is a fool's errand, an endless war fought on unfavorable terrain. True power comes from rendering those opinions irrelevant to your own functioning. It is the attainment of a state of profound and unshakable inner sovereignty. The world will always be a chaotic theater of fickle judgments, ingratitude, and self-interest. You cannot change this, but you can build a state within yourself that is immune to that chaos. A state built not with the borrowed materials of validation, but forged from the iron of your own will, defended by the weapons of your own reason, and governed by the singular, unwavering authority of your own judgment. The ultimate prize is not to sit on a throne in the eyes of the world, but to become the throne itself, the immovable seat of power from which the empire of your own life is ruled.